Hello everybody, I'm Anna from City News and today we are with Odile Weber.
I've had a bit of an exciting evening because I just gave a talk about one of my favorite topics, which is the plants from Ethiopia. Well, the first time that I went to Ethiopia was because I was standing in for a friend who no longer wanted to go on fieldwork. She had just heard the news that she was pregnant, and so she didn't want to take any risks going on a tropical expedition, and I filled in for her. But that was quite some time ago. But it did start to sort of consolidate opportunities for further work in that country, where there's still very much to be done to describe new species and document what the vegetation types are, or and where species grow. On expeditions, especially with people who are very experienced, they'll notice when they see a plant that they just haven't seen before, and then we would stop and collect the plant to document it. At the moment, some colleagues of mine, Professor Sebsebi Demisi and Professor Ibfries, they are revising one important group of plants from Ethiopia, and they're basing themselves on the account that was written for the flora some 20-30 years ago, and so they are adding more information based on specimens that have been collected since the flora account was written. And I think there's a couple of new species in that new account. The plant family is the Burseraceae, that includes quite a few very important species for Ethiopia.
So how do you know if the species are new to science?
That's a very good question, and that's where plant collections come in. So you would try and show the specimen that you take from the plant that you think might be not named with a scientific name, and you would show it to a specialist on that plant group. And they are specialists because they've studied all the plant specimens, or very extensively the collections, at herbaria, like at the University of Addis Ababa. They know what the different species look like. They've worked with identification keys, and if the specimen that you collected is new, then you wouldn't be able to key it out using the flora, and the specialist would say, oh, it looks very much like this, but it differs with particular characters. And then you would what I've done in the past for one species is to do a morphometric study where we looked at the dimensions of the flowers. So we measured the different bits of the flower under the microscope and then did statistical analysis of it. Because the flower, quite often the flowers will have either a different shape or a different size of particular structures, which mean that it is different from the already known species in that group. But sometimes a species, it has all the characters of a genus that you know, but it just looks so different to all the other known species in the group that you can be really, really confident that it is a new species. And that's what happened to the example that I showed in my presentation of Comicarpus macrotumnus. It looks like a Comicarpus, and it has sticky flowers, but it's just so much bigger than all the other known species from the flora area. So that was quite an easy example. But we still talked to one of the specialists at Kew Gardens in London, because they have a very vast collection from all Africa, not just Ethiopia, but kind of globally, to look at it and study it with us together. Since 2009, there have been over 50 new species that have been described from Ethiopia that were not known to science before. I mean, they've existed, but they just hadn't been documented. And there are still large areas, especially in the southeast of the country, that are not explored very extensively. And that's where many endemic species have been found in the past. Yeah, quite often, and that would get done over the local names in the local languages, and the Flora project tried to compile local names of plants for different languages, and they did a very good job of that. So quite often, people who use plants locally, they would know. They know the species, they know which ones they can use in different ways for medicinal purposes, or that make good fodder plants for the animals, or may even be toxic for the animals, so they'll occasionally weed them away. The scientific name is not the only way of communicating about plants, and there's a real richness of having lists of the names in the native languages. There's also a project for the plants from Luxembourg to have a concise and sort of a revised list of the names in Luxembourgish for the plants that grow in this country. There have been attempts before, but they haven't been complete. So they're trying to complete that list of the names of the species that grow here in Luxembourgish. I did collaborate with a team of people on, and the most significant one of that is that big yellow one. So that was a book. I mean, it turned into a book. It was supposed to be a paper, and then we sort of added more and more information about it. This was a study that was started by Professor Ibfries, and in collaboration with Paulo van Breugel from the Netherlands and Sepsebi Demisiu at Addis Ababa University. And they wanted to go and test the limits of the potential vegetation types that they had described in the Atlas of the Potential Vegetation of Ethiopia more than 10 years ago. So Ib set out to take to write down the names of all the woody species from different plots in the country, starting in the north. And I joined him on the trips that were in the southwest of the savanna areas. And then Paulo did lots of statistics on the results, and we found out that the vegetation type, that is the Combretum terminalia vegetation type, is quite a good vegetation type, and that you could subdivide it into the green, blue and orange area, where the orange area at the top has fewer species than the green area and the blue. But that it is a uniform vegetation type. And that it holds up to empirical evidence, where before the vegetation types were more sort of models based on climate and the distribution of species and altitude. What is impressive is that some species that grow in Ethiopia also grow all the way to the west coast. So, and that there can be a gap in the distribution. So it occurs in Ethiopia and in Sudan and South Sudan, and then again further west in Africa. But there's an area in the middle that those species don't occur in, which suggests that the vegetation type that is normal for them used to be much more widely distributed, and that there was a continuous distribution of the species throughout Africa. I work here. My office is in the building next door. I've been working on collecting, assembling and standardizing the species lists published in vegetation studies of different forests, to also kind of try and test the accuracy of the of the vegetation types identified by Ib Fries, Paulo van Breugel and Sepse Bidemisi in the Atlas of the Potential Vegetation of Ethiopia. So we've got since the 1980s, and with the publication of the flora, these the studies of vegetations and of forests, what trees and so on grow in forests, really multiplied. And it means that Ethiopia is much more in a position to concert their efforts for conservation and to study what is needed to reforest areas. So in the north of the country especially, many of the forests have vanished completely, or are only around, are small patches of forest around sacred groves and churches. And there was another book published, but I'm not involved on that at all, about conservation efforts of the forest in around the churches. Yeah, so that's one thing. So getting from published works, published studies, take the list of the species and then make sure that they're all named after, according to the same list, so that there's no spelling mistakes or differences in the taxonomy with synonyms and so on, so that we can do statistics on them similar to the statistics that were done for this book. The funds, I guess, I mean, 2 years ago when I was on fieldwork, the funding came just from the museum, so from the Ministry of Culture of the Luxembourgish government. And then, but another project that I'm hope to be involved in with the Chingawa forest, that funding comes from an African organization, or kind of an organization that is active in Africa. And they've said yes to having me as a botanist on that expedition. We just try to figure out the logistics, and I still need to apply for permission to go from my director and from the government. So government employees can't just go and travel abroad for work, they have to get permission beforehand.